Welcome to the Cardboard Herald. As always, I'm your host, Jack, and today we're doing things a little bit differently because on the line right now, as we are speaking, I have the owner, founder, operator of Gamelyn Games, Michael Coe, on the line. Mike, thank you so much for coming on to the Cardboard Herald once again. The return.
Yeah, you're welcome, Jack. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for you. As always, you seem to have a Kickstarter up at all times of the year these days. But right now we have the Tiny Epic Defenders 2nd edition and expansion up on Kickstarter. So we wanted to do a real quick turnaround. So this is kind of a special thing here. So why don't you tell me, just kind of in a brief overview here, why are people going to be super excited about both a 2nd edition of Tiny Epic Defenders and an expansion for this game?
Well, so the expansion is phenomenal, and it really takes Tiny Epic Defenders to the next level. And if you hop over to the Kickstarter, you can see people are already just super excited about it. The project's blowing up, getting a lot of really good reception. We've put a free print and play out there for the changes that we did in the 2nd edition of Tiny Epic Defenders. So anybody that's familiar with the first one can go and download that, play it, check it out, get a feel for some of the changes that we've made, and see how we've improved the game. So with Tiny Epic Defenders, it was the 2nd entry in the series, and it's been a few years now since we released the 1st edition. And while justifiably so necessarily, the game was kind of looked at as, or perceived as, our least popular Tiny Epic game, despite it being a very great game. So, but part of that also, we at that time when we made the game, we didn't have the resources that we do now from the continued success of the Tiny Epic series, and we were out of copies. We wanted to reprint the game, but I didn't feel good about just pressing reprint on the game as it was, considering some of the criticism the game had. And also I felt like we could just do a better job. So we poured a bunch of resources into the game to kind of rise it to the level of quality, both in the mechanics and the gameplay, but also the presentation of the game, how it looks, the graphic design, which will help the player feel more immersed in the game. They'll be able to. We've got like player aids and things now that we didn't have that'll kind of aid with the playing process. And then we upped the quality of the components just to kind of get it up to. Every time we launch a Kickstarter, we want to do it. We want to raise the bar. Every time we release a game, we want it to be better than our last game, and we want to continue to one-up ourselves, and we're never just complacent or kind of willing to ride the coattails of the series. We want to constantly improve the series and impress our backers and the gamers. And so we felt Tiny Epic Defenders needed a bit of a facelift, so we put a lot more into it, and here we are. We launched the revision with a really great expansion on Kickstarter, and it's doing really great.
Well, I think it's a lot more than just a revision of this game. It's like a complete reimagining of the game, just to make sure that everyone listening to this checks it out. It is like a complete overhaul artistically of the mechanisms within the game. Like, this is in spirit the Tiny Epic Defenders that I certainly love. If people listen to my interview with you originally, or the interview I did with Scott Alms, the designer of the Tiny Epic games, I love Tiny Epic Defenders. It is my favorite in the series, not only for the gameplay reasons, but also it holds a very special place in my heart for the time that I received it. But this is like completely reimagining what this game is and can be. One thing that I want to make clear for the audience and for me as a Tiny Epic Defenders 1.0 owner, do you need the Tiny Epic Defenders 2nd edition in order to play with the expansion, or is there some way of bootstrapping some of the new mechanisms into the game so previous backers can jump right in with the expansion?
So the expansion is it's compatible only with the new 2nd edition. the main reason being is the graphic design has changed in the game. I kind of mentioned that earlier, but along with that, there's been some changes to the like the back of the cards, and so shuffling the two, like a first edition game with the expansion, the cards are going to be distinguishable, and so that's probably the biggest problem with trying to mix the two. But I mean, even then, even if that wasn't a thing, all of the art is a very different style now, and so it would look really strange to have a first edition game mixed with with the expansion. It would look just like completely two different games that are trying to be played at the same time. So there'd be some visual issues as well. But then furthermore, there's mechanical changes that you really would need to account for in the first edition in order to play. So, I mean, you'd have to take a Sharpie to several of your cards in the first edition for it to play properly with the expansion. So, you know, it's just compatible with the new version of Tiny Epic Defenders.
Was that a tough choice for you to make the expansion exclusively available or exclusively usable for second edition owners?
Yes, because I didn't, you know, having all the people that supported the first project go back and buy the game again is not something that I just jumped right into. It wasn't something I was super excited about, obviously. It's like I don't want them to feel not taken care of, or that we're being inconsiderate of their support, because their support is how the game was made in the first place, and it's tremendous. And so that was never an easy thing to do. But when we started reworking some things in Tiny Epic Defenders, originally it started off where it was going to be, well, this one is going to be compatible with the expansion. But then as we got deeper into changing the game, it came to the point where we said, we just, you know, it's unfortunate, but we need to fully commit to really, for the long-term success of this game and its expansion and how well they play together and how well they look together. It was important that we just fully committed. And, you know, on the Kickstarter, I've offered a discount to the original owners of Tiny Epic Defenders so that they can save a little bit of money. Now, there's not a lot of margin in the Tiny Epic games because they're small price point games to begin with, and we pack them chock full. We're making $50 games by anybody's standard in $25 boxes, and so there's not a lot of margin to work with, but we did what we could, and we offered a bit of a discount on the Kickstarter page to kind of help with that. But ultimately, it just, you know, at the end of the day, I just want to make the best possible game I can, and I want to put out just fantastic game content. And in order to really do that properly with Tiny Epic Defenders, we had to just fully commit and update the first edition, and then the expansion just fits so well with the revised Tiny Epic Defenders base game that it was a tough choice, but it was one that we had to make.
With the overwhelming response for Tiny Epic Defenders and the especially beautiful art style, is this making you relook at the art style at all for Tiny Epic Kingdoms, which the original version of that had a same art style as Defenders? Do you want to unify those lines?
No, not right now, actually. I mean, maybe that comes as a bit of a surprise, but I'm not sure why I like the appearance of Tiny Epic Kingdoms as much as I do over how Tiny Epic Defenders came out. But I'm much happier with Tiny Epic Kingdoms, and I'm not in any sort of I mean, it's really nowhere on the plate. We've got a lot in the pipeline. We've got future Tiny Epic games that we're working on, and right now and other titles, but a revision of Tiny Epic Kingdoms has not been uttered by any of myself, anybody on my team. It's nowhere in the works. And so I mean, I'll never say never, but I really don't see that happening, and it's certainly not going to happen anytime soon. And we've already gone back and reprinted Tiny Epic Kingdoms multiple times now. And so those would have been our opportunities to update the game and to change the game. But I've always felt that Tiny Epic Kingdoms is a great game as it is, and the art that it currently has does a very good job capturing the feel that we want Tiny Epic Kingdoms to have. So I've never felt the need to go back and change it, and I still don't.
Now, I don't only want to focus on the artwork of the game. When you and Scott were first talking about coming up with a second edition of Tiny Epic Defenders, were there specific game mechanisms that you were focusing on as these are things that we want to fix or change or add in this new edition, or was it more freeform than that?
No, there was definitely some keynotes and things that we wanted to hit. Mainly, we wanted to change the balance or the experience of the epic foe and the crescendo effect that the game has, because that's always been the number one thing that's made Tiny Epic Defenders as great as it is that there's this crescendo effect, and it happens every game, and it's built right into the mechanics and how that works. And so the game starts off light, and then it gets a little bit, more difficult, and then by the end, everything is just gone crazy, and you're going to win by just, the thinnest chance, But we didn't want it to feel. So the first edition, we felt it was coming down to chance too much. It was coming down to, if you just get a bad set of cards in a row, you're going to lose the game. And then the player, it's not a good experience to lose a game and you don't know how to blame yourself. That's, as a player, if you lose, it's okay, so long as you can go back and analyze, this is why I lost. I didn't do this. I didn't build my strategy or execute it properly. But I felt like that was a little bit absent in the original Tiny Epic Defenders. And so that was something we really wanted to fix as well. But we wanted to shift the way that that crescendo effect happens so that it ramps up, and so that the epic foe is a bigger experience. It's a more exciting, more involved part of the game. So one of the major overhauls was with the epic foes. We didn't just tweak their abilities in minor ways, but we also added a whole new mechanical concept to the epic foe, which are these trigger points on his health bar. So now when an epic foe reaches certain levels of health, it's got a second ability that it's going to do, and that changes the strategy, and it makes it a much more involved experience, and which is fantastic. It's made the epic foes a lot harder as well. So that's something that we wanted. We wanted the difficulty to be in the epic foe, not in just the randomness of the card sequence. So we also went back and we lightened the difficulty a little bit on your journey to the epic foe, so that you could be ready for the now more difficult epic foes.
Oh, man, that sounds so incredibly cool, because those epic foes, not just are they a bigger part of the game, but they're physically bigger cards, or at least in the first edition they were, and it felt epic as soon as those guys hit the table. It felt like stuff just got real, and even though the entire world is burning down, you now have your final hopefully victorious battle towards the end of the game. I'm wondering if the dire enemies have actually changed. Have you changed how those work? Because those were a big part of the game and a big challenge in dealing with them as you worked your way towards the epic foe.
So for the most part, the dire enemies are functioning about the same. We did go through and tweak a little bit to their abilities, but in terms of how they come out, how you deal with them, and then what they reward you with if you're able to defeat them, that all plays out the same, with the exception of we did change artifacts. And that was another point to the game that we wanted to revisit. In the first edition, you would get an artifact, and then you would use it, and it would go away. So it'd be kind of like if you were playing a game where you're deep in the dungeon, and all you find are the brittle sword and the brittle shield, right? It's got one use and then it shatters, right? And every item breaks, right? We wanted artifacts to feel more grand, to feel more rewarding. And so now they're permanent use items. You're not busting your sword upon hitting one thing. You're going to be able to keep that sword. And it's where you're putting these plastic items into the hands of the meeple themselves. And it turned out really, really great. The toy factor on that one is through the roof, but the tactile experience is great. The visual experience is great. And so that was also, it lent itself really well to Tiny Epic Defenders, because now when you're getting those artifacts and you're destroying those dire enemies, you're going to feel much more rewarded being able to equip an actual item to your meeple. And now you're going to be running around the different regions in this kind of promoted state. And it's more exciting. But then you're going to get more use out of the items as well. So that's great too.
Are they also functional in the sense that it's a limitation on the amount of equipment that you can carry?
That's correct. So we did limit it. So now you're restricted to 2 hand items, but then we also introduced back items, which was something we didn't have in Tiny Epic Quest. So that's really a cool evolution of the item meeple in Tiny Epic Defenders. Is now you're getting, like, you can get a cape, or you can get these wings that allow you to fly around the board, and so you could have 2 front items and 1 back item with the new limitation.
Yeah, these item meeples, they are incredibly impressive, and anyone, regardless of whether you're interested in the Tiny Epic series up until this point or not, you have to check these out on the current Kickstarter. They are kind of breathtaking and one of the coolest looking board game pieces that are out there. And I imagine that there are a few people out there who are backing this game just for those. But you're also getting, again, a killer game. Like I said, Tiny Epic Defenders is my favorite in the line. Now, this leads us actually to a Twitter question that we had here. @CuriousConjurer asked, not about Defenders specifically, but can we expect to see item meeples as a regular feature in the Tiny Epic games from now on? I vote yes.
Well, that's a great question, Curious Conjurer. So we love the item meeples here at Gamelyn Games. We're very proud of the component. The way that it turned out and was executed is just top of the line. The product quality is phenomenal, and it's just a really fun toy. So that's definitely a toy we want to continue to play with when it presents itself. So it's not a lot of people ask, well, what comes first in game design? Is it the mechanics? Is it the theme, right? And then now, you could ask, or is it the component when we have a component like the item meeple? But I'll say that the item meeples are not, it doesn't come item meeple first and then we design the game. And so we're not going to be releasing Tiny Epics exclusively with item meeples for the rest of time. But this has taken, the item meeples has definitely taken hold of our imagination. And so you definitely will be seeing more Tiny Epic games with item meeples, and really any chance we get an opportunity to use item meeples, we will. Now, they're very expensive as well. That's part of it, but that's not something we've been afraid to approach with the Tiny Epic series because of the tremendous support that the series has garnered. I'll tell you, I don't know another publisher that would touch a $25 board game with the mold costs associated with making item meeples. If this were in the hands of any other publisher, they would say, if we're going to have a component like that, there's no way we're putting this in a box that is less than $50 and is less than 10 by 10 inches, right? Like they would have to up the price of the game in order to compensate and justify having the kind of costs associated with making the game's components. But that's, again, we've continued to make every effort possible to one-up ourselves, to improve the quality of the game, and certainly in its components and of course its mechanics. But that's, we're fully committed to this series. We're fully committed to the backers that support us of this series. So over the span of a few years now, while we've been releasing Tiny Epic games, we've never changed the MSRP that the game retails for, but we continue to put more in the box, and we continue to devote more of our resources to components like the item meeples to really just bolster how fantastic these games can be. And we still have a lot more to explore. There's some exciting things coming out for Tiny Epic and for Item Meeples next year in 2018, and it's going to blow some people away. And yet again, the MSRP of the games will stay the same. So you can definitely look forward to seeing more of these coming out.
Can you recall the genesis of the idea? Like, what were you, or was it Scott, whoever it was, thinking when you were like, hey, what if we put slots in our meeples and actually equipped them with items?
Yeah, so it was a collaboration between Scott and I. We had been working on Tiny Epic Quest. You know, when Scott and I were kind of having our brainstorming sessions about Tiny Epic Quest, we knew we wanted to have a game where you were going on adventures and you were finding equipment and you were gearing up your character. And so we were kind of exploring different ways. And the more affordable way would have been like, well, you just get this cardboard chit and you put it next to your player card, or you just get this, card and you put it next to your player mat, and then that is, now you've got that item, right? But with the way that Tiny Epic Quest is all three of your heroes, they don't have individual mats, and so we really needed a different way or different approach to make sure that it was distinguishable what heroes had what items, and we didn't want you to have to keep referring to individual cards to see what items they had. So we were exploring ways to try and get it onto the meeple component on the board, so that when you look across the board, you can just see what you've got all in one place. And there were maybe you get a meeple where there's a slit that's cut in the shoulder, and then you insert a cardboard piece, right? And so we kind of went back and forth with a few ideas, and then it was just like, well, you know what? I don't know how much it's going to cost, but this is a crazy idea, but I'm going to get in touch with my manufacturer, and I'm going to see what it takes to actually make a plastic piece that plugs into the item meeple, not too unlike maybe putting a peg inside your car in the game of life, right? Like, what if we do something like that, but don't get too excited, Scott. I got to figure out if I'm going to have to bankrupt my entire company to make this component first. And so, but that was kind of the origin. It came from our brainstorming sessions of Tiny Epic Quest, and how that game was unfolding. And while it was incredibly expensive to make, fortunately, Tiny Epic Quest was our most successful Tiny Epic game to date. So we were able to take those funds and put them back into the game and make that component. And so while the molds for the individual pieces are going to continue to be a cost we have to take on, the actual mold for the item meeple itself is a cost that's been paid for now. And so while it's not as expensive now to reuse item meeples, because we at least don't have to continually change the shape of the meeple himself. So that's good.
Well, I have a couple more questions specifically about Tiny Epic Defenders here. Was the expansion and the second edition designed in parallel? And did you have to decide which elements were going to be part of the new second edition core experience? Or did you focus purely on a second edition first and then started working on expansion ideas later? So
nothing shifted games, in the sense that there weren't any ideas that we were having where we were like, well, let's revise the original Tiny Epic Defenders, but that's a great idea, let's pull that out of Tiny Epic Defenders and put it in the expansion. Nothing like that occurred. But the two games, the revision of the first game and the design of the second game, did go kind of hand in hand. That did kind of occur simultaneously. While Scott was designing the expansion, we also had conversations about the original Tiny Epic Defenders and what we could do to improve upon the original Tiny Epic Defenders to make sure to really lift the expansion experience to the next level. And part of that has been kind of the change of several mechanics within the base game. One of the main mechanics being the way that when a region is destroyed, the enemy that attacked the region is used to cover that region and show that it's been destroyed, instead of pulling a card from the box that was not used. And this actually dwindles down the turn deck so that the hero cards or defender cards to enemy ratio gets slightly more in your favor as you start losing regions, which kind of goes back to what I was saying, some of the things that we changed to make the game a little bit easier. But this plays into the expansion because the expansion brings on some pretty serious challenges. The dire enemies, I would say, are a little bit harder. The epic foes are definitely a little bit harder. And then there's also hostile regions that make the game harder. So we needed to do some things with the first edition to make sure that we could buy ourselves the room to make the expansion as difficult as we wanted with our design goals. And so that was part of the change as well. So if that makes sense, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, totally. Was there anything particularly challenging about getting this game ready for Kickstarter? Was there any one snag, whether it's on the production side of things, the planning side of things, or the design side of things?
The biggest snag was just the how our community was going to receive it. That was the biggest snag for me because like I was saying earlier, I didn't want to just disappoint everybody. That this is not just a business for me. This is it's more than just a livelihood too. This is my company is one big passion project. I love making games, and I know that if I make too many missteps, then I'm going to cut myself out of the privilege of making games. And so I'm very careful about the decisions that I make because I want to keep doing this, and I want to do it for as long as the board game community will let me do it. And so my biggest fear with Tiny Epic Defenders, the relaunch with the expansion, was going to be that I would just upset too many people, and then it would just make the series look bad, and make me as a publisher look bad, make Scott look bad, and that was something I was a little bit nervous of. So that was definitely the biggest hurdle in this particular game. But I trusted our instincts, and I trusted the new presentation of the game. I just trusted that the changes in the game's mechanics, the end experience that a player goes through when they play the game, I trusted that was going to be enough to not upset everybody, because I've always believed as a creator, if you put the integrity of the product first, then everything else will work out in the end. It's there's that saying, I don't know, when the dust settles, the truth remains, right? Like, so if we were true to our design goals and the integrity of the product, then after the dust settled of the change, then it would be better off in the long run. And so that was something I just had to commit to, despite being a little bit nervous about it. And the support on the Kickstarter has shown that the overwhelming majority of backers, both who own the original game, because that tier has a ton of backers, but then also people that are coming into the game for the first time, definitely appreciate the changes we've made, and it's overwhelming. It's just fantastic. It really, it's like, we talk about it at the office every single day, how elated we are that we've been able to have another success with these changes, despite some of the obvious frustration that was going to occur with these changes. And I'm just glad that people see that we were true to making the game as good as it can be for the gamer. And it's, in the end, that is what I feel is the most important thing as a creator. And, I believe it's paying off here.
Hell yeah, man. I mean, it again just looks so incredible, and it looks like it exemplifies the spirit of Gamelyn Games and the love and trust of your audience and a reflection of your appreciation for everything that has taken you to this point. I mean, you're updating something and saying, this is the best thing that I can possibly give you as an audience, and still have it be something that can be your livelihood and can still afford to keep on making these awesome games for people. So to take one more Twitter question here, at Greg A. Ramir, he can kind of put an end to this specific Tiny Epic Defenders discussion. What is the change you are most excited about with the second edition, and what part of the expansion are you most proud of?
Yeah, so I'm most excited about the change to the epic foes in the first edition to the second edition. Take like the giant, for instance, and he's in the free print and play. But so players, they have to spend action points when he comes out into the plains, and now you're facing this huge giant. The players actually have to spend actions to leave the region they're in, to climb up onto the giant. So you're actually going to place your meeple on the giant's card, onto his back, or up onto his head.
Oh my god, that is so cool!
And you have to, it is cool, and and you have to battle him from his back. But then every certain interval of his health, he's going to get super agitated, and he's going to shake everybody off his back, and then he's going to run to a new region. So then you got to chase him down, jump back up on him, and start whacking him again. And that's so much more immersive than he was in the first edition. And that's just one example.
Okay, really quick. You have to tell me, is that in part at all inspired by your experience with Zelda Breath of the Wild? Because I know there's some giants in there who you have to hop up on. You have to do battle with them, and I know you were playing that game.
Maybe somewhere in the back of my mind, but not directly. I actually didn't think about Breath of the Wild when we came up with that idea. I think that idea is kind of classic for giants in general, right? Like, didn't Mickey Mouse have to jump up onto the giant in Mickey and the Beanstalk or whatever that is, right?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Like having to jump up on a giant to be effective and to get him where it hurts has been something that I think has kind of fit the trope or the archetype of fighting a giant. The second part, what I'm most excited about, or what I like most about the expansion probably comes in the way of the skills and the leveling up. So the heroes have their abilities, but now they get skill cards. And those skill cards are going to introduce additional abilities to the heroes. And then you have experience points. And there's a balance that you have to do with the experience points, because you're going to have to use the experience points to trigger most of these abilities. And so, but if you save up your experience, when you get to 8 experience points, you're able to level up and get another skill. And so you can potentially get up to 3 skills, or level 3, or whatever you'd like to refer to it as. But you have to find that balance. Am I going to spend the XP to get the kind of in-game advantage that I need now based on the tactics and what's going on in the game? Or can I just kind of sit on this experience and save it up and level up and get another skill for a later part of the game? And this really unfolds in the campaign mode. So in the expansion, there's a campaign mode now where you're going to go through 3 full battles of Tiny Epic Defenders, and each one is going to be a little bit different and a little bit more difficult than the last. And you're not going to be facing the epic foe until the 3rd time through. And in the first 2 battles, you're going to be facing generals, which are a new enemy that we've introduced into the expansion. They're more difficult than dire enemies. They function like an epic foe, but they're not quite as powerful as an epic foe. But you carry over your experience, your levels, your artifacts into the next battle in the campaign. So by the time you get to the 2nd or the 3rd battle in the campaign, you're going to be level 2 or 3. You're going to have all your artifacts equipped, and by then your hero is just going to be totally rocking, and the game is going to be more difficult because there's going to be more hostile regions and whatnot, but you're going to be equipped to take on this challenge. And so that is really, really exciting. I guess just the combination, the marrying of the campaign mode with the skills and the experience points.
That sounds incredible. Like, it really sounds like you have packed so many immersive elements into this game and are continuing to expand not just what a tiny game is or a small box game is, but it really seems like you're kind of pushing the envelope on what tabletop games in general could be. With the success of Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, which is still in production right now, right? That hasn't been delivered.
Correct. That's slated for delivery in March, but we are ahead of schedule. So I'm not going to make any sort of like commitment or major announcement, but I will say that we're ahead of schedule by a decent amount, and that game is turning out so good. It's going to be the biggest miss of 2017 for people that didn't back the Kickstarter. I'm telling you, it is going to just blow people away. The quality of the miniatures, the quality of the pre-painted miniatures is so beyond any other game out there right now. And the mixing of that with 3D constructs and putting your miniatures up into airships and putting them in boats and sailing across the sea, it is so exciting and is so immersive. Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea is my favorite game anywhere. And it sounds, whatever that I made it sounds super biased, but to hell with that. It is just the best game I've ever played. And I'll just say that shamelessly because I love that game so much.
Well, you should be in love with the games that you make. They should be the games that you personally feel convicted about, that you want to bring to the world, because that's going to be the purest representation, and hopefully other people will come to it. And it sure as hell seems like people have. And I'm wondering, with the success of that, are you planning on additional games outside of the Tiny Epic line? Like, not just as a possibility for the future, but does Gamelyn Games right now have something in their back pocket that may be other big box games?
Yes, most definitely.
There it is. All right. Are you able to share anything about this?
So, I can say that it's going to be, I can say that our long-term goal, or our big picture goal, is to make a series of games in the Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea style. So we would love to have two series of games simultaneously being released by Gamelyn Games, the Tiny Epic series and the Heroes series, and be able to do that long term. And so that's something that is very exciting for me, because it allows me to say to Scott, okay, your shackles have been removed. Just go to town, right? Like, just now you can put in everything you ever wanted into a game. Now, granted, that's still not exactly how it goes, because it's always important to be aware of trimming it down, right, and making sure that the game delivers the right experience. I always attribute this to, or I always draw kind of a connection between like movie editing and board game producing, where if you watch a director's cut of a film, typically it's going to be more boring than the theatrical release of the film, because the director is very much in love with his footage, and he may hold on to certain scenes or certain sequences longer than what the editor felt was needed to get the point across. And in a lot of those cases, it just drags. And so having an editor who has an eye for the experience that is being delivered with this product is always, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of producing a good product. Is not just self-publishing your own designs and you keep in all the things you love. So while I'm saying, Scott, go to town, I'm also still very much his editor, and I will make sure that the end result of the experience that's being delivered is clean and crisp and to the point. The mantra that I stay true to is more fun faster. So I'm like, Scott, I'm having so much fun with this. why the heck aren't we doing just more of this and less of all of this other noise, right? Like, let's trim this down and just get to the fun faster and do more of that. So that's still very much the approach that we take. But with Heroes, we're able to explore much grander concepts. And so in my perfect world as a publisher, we could be making the Tiny Epic series of these fantastically epic games in small, affordable boxes that work as awesome gateway games that bring more people into the industry and show them, hey, look what board gaming can do. But then it leaves you hungry for more. But then on the other side, I can also be releasing these huge games with amazing high quality miniatures, and put in a ton of phenomenal mechanics and components. But there's going to be for a bit of a more committed gamer community. But at the same time, there's still Scott Alm's designs, and he's got a knack for making them very approachable. You don't have to take a college course before you play the game. You can just get right into it, and it flows. Once you understand how the engine works, which doesn't take any longer than a half a game, then it becomes second nature, and the game is very easy to play. But then how you want to develop your strategy is where your mind power goes, instead of trying to figure out the intricacies of the rules. That's something that we're dedicated to as a publishing team. So yes, there's going to be more things in that box size of Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, if we're permitted by the support of the series. And so, so far we've been able to do what we've done with the Tiny Epic series only because of the tremendous support that the community has shown for that series. Without that, we wouldn't be able to have the series that we have. Maybe we wouldn't have item meeples. Maybe we wouldn't have Tiny Epic Galaxies. And so as the community shows their love and support and appreciation for the products we're putting out, we're enabled to continue to up ourselves and come back with a better game than we did last time, and just continue to blow their socks off and impress them with better and better games.
You are someone who has a very distinct vision of what the Tiny Epic games can be and what the other product lines that Gamelyn Games can have are. And I'm wondering if you have visions about what Gamelyn Games can represent more than just being good, fun playing games. Is there anything outside of that scope that specifically you want people to think of when they think of Gamelyn Games, as opposed to any of the other games on the market that may or may not be game related? From the beginning,
When I first started Gamelyn Games, I came from a customer service background. And so I always, my mission statement, both on paper and in my mind, was always customers first. And that was the most important thing. And then as I grew as a company and as a publisher, I started to realize how I actually achieved that. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying a little bit earlier, where now the customer is always first in my mind, while now, though, it's the integrity of the product that is most important to me, because that serves the customer. So by the end of the product, the customer is effectively going to be first because I put the product first, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that
and
does.
So I've kind of changed, or at least I've gotten to a point now where I know how to define better what I mean when I say customer first. And it really means product first, and the value that they're getting. But when people see Gamelyn Games, I want them to know a couple of things. I want them to know that the money we make, we put back into our products. And so therefore, you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. You're never going to be sold air. You're never going to be sold a game that has room for you to put 2 others or 3 other games you have, and then you can bring that game around to game night. That's never going to be a box we're going to sell you. We don't have inserts anymore. I think the only insert we've ever had was in the original Tiny Epic Defenders, but now we've chocked that so full of content that it's not going to rattle around. I mean, so we don't want a bunch of air. And when people think Gamelyn Games, I want them to one, think that we invest in our products with our revenue to make our products better and offer it at the best price that you can get a game for the quality that you're getting it. And 2, I want for people to know that these games are going to be straightforward and approachable in how they play. I don't come from a board game background. I didn't grow up playing board games. And I also didn't grow up reading a lot of books. I grew up playing video games and watching movies. And so I like instant gratification. I want things to come to me faster. I don't want to have to read a lot. I want to just be able to play and have fun right when I open the box. And so it's always been very important to make the games that we produce that way, where they're straightforward, they're approachable, they're easy to learn and quick to play. And even Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, it only plays 30 minutes per player. So even a 6-player game is going to play in 3 hours, but you're going to get a huge full 4X experience, which is typically reserved for 6 to 8 hour games. And so even though that one plays longer than what we've shown in the Tiny Epic series, it's still very fast for what it is. And so those are a couple of things that I want people to know when they see a Gamelyn Games product, is you're going to get a tremendous value, and you're going to get a game that is going to be easy for you to understand and play, and it's always going to be more fun, faster than other games. And so, I mean, that's directly related to gaming. In terms of like unrelated to gaming, there are definitely ways that we need to grow our company. One thing that we've not done very well at, while we have built a tremendous community around the Tiny Epic series, we've not done so well at building a support for people who like to share our games, like envoys, or people that want to go out and demo the games at their stores, or run tournaments, or go to conventions and act as kind of like agents for Gamelyn Games and show off our stuff. We've not done a very good job of providing a lot of support for that particular aspect of gaming. And that's something that I definitely want to improve upon and focus on moving forward as a company. It's been a bit of a hurdle for me to figure out how exactly to go about that. And that's part of me learning and growing as a publisher. But that's one area of improvement that I see right now with Gamelyn Games.
As far as the principles that you want to uphold as Gamelyn Games, you have done such an incredible job of cultivating a community, of being responsible to your backers, and clearly delivering a product that you can be proud of and feel confident that they're going to love. I mean, what you did with the Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea Kickstarter, where even though it was successful, pulled it down and said, no, I can do better, and then re-delivered that. And what you're doing now with the Tiny Epic Defenders 2.0, I am certain that you could have reprinted the original game and it would have sold, but instead you wanted something to be really special. And that is important to me as a gamer and as someone who makes podcasts in this space, is to see that there are people who have conviction about what they're doing and believe in what they're doing and love that they're doing it for other people, to celebrate alongside of them. And so I am so thrilled, as always, to be talking with you, and honestly, I can't wait to see this game in action. It really looks like something special.
I do appreciate you saying that and bringing that up, because we could have made more profit per unit if we just reprinted the original content that we had already paid for and developed, and then just made an expansion that fit that old content, we would have made more profit per game. But again, it's not me just being trite or just spouting out words. It's really not about the money first. It's about the quality of the content first. I'm a firm believer that if you spend enough time at your passion to become good enough at what you're doing, then people will pay you for it. And the money is not, if you put the money first, you're putting a barrier in between being really good at what you're actually doing. And so I've always put making good games first, and the money is a byproduct of the time and effort and work and trial and error and the mistakes. I mean, even after all the success that we've had from Tiny Epic Quest and Tiny Epic Galaxies, we still made mistakes with Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. We're not perfect, but we don't let those mistakes get us down. We see that mistakes and certain failures are a key part of success. And to kind of circle around, because it got me thinking, but to kind of circle around back to what you're asking, the other important thing with Gamelyn Games that I want people to think about when they see that shield is that, we listen. We're not a faceless. We're a 3-person company. It's me, my wife, and Nathan, who is a rock star. But it's just us 3, and then we have our team with Scott Alms and our graphic designer, our illustrators. But in terms of internal Gamelyn Games employees, it's just the 3 of us, and so we're not a big faceless company. And when you type out your feelings on Board Game Geek, and people know this, I don't even have to say it, but they know I read every single one of those comments because I'm all over the place. I'm responding on Board Game Geek, Twitter, Facebook, Kickstarter, constantly addressing people's concerns, both their positive feedback and their negative feedback. I'm reading it all, and I'm taking it all in, and I'm listening to it all, and our games get better because of it. Another thing that's really important to me, kind of like an old saying that I heard, right, is like the way that you treat the 1 is how the 99 will feel that you're going to treat them, right? So like when somebody comments on Kickstarter or on Board Game Geek, and let's say it's something that is not positive. So for one, I don't know exactly where they're coming from. I don't know their situation exactly, and nor can I read into the entire context of what they're saying. It's just text on a screen. So instead of reading that and having an immediate knee-jerk reaction of, oh, this person is a troll, or oh, this person is just trying to get under my skin, I never have that as my initial reaction. I always think, okay, well, it's like if you just pretend that like your best friend is saying this to you, even if it's somebody you don't know, then you're more inclined to take a good approach to it. And a lot of times, if you do that, there's little nuggets of gold that are underneath some of that, and you can improve upon your process and improve upon your game by actually taking all the feedback very, very seriously. And that kind of ties into another thing, which is not something you've asked, but some people ask, why are you still using Kickstarter? Why, now that you have your own money from the Tiny Epic series, why do you continue to go back to Kickstarter? And the number one answer, the very first thing on my mind, is because our games get better because they're on Kickstarter. The community is so creative. And even when they're saying things that are not necessarily positive, like I said, there's information there that can be mined and is valuable. And every one of our games, every single one of them, has become a better game because of the feedback provided by our supporters and the people who don't support us. That has all been it's all come together to make our games better. And so I don't have any interest in cutting out that creative process in my publication of games because I love it. It's so much of the value of our games comes from that feedback. So, that's all. Maybe I went off on a long tangent, but I felt like they needed to get that message out there.
It takes a hell of a lot of integrity to be able to look at criticism and say, this is how I learned to make it better. And it ties back into what you were talking about of building the product that you believe in, and that people will give you money. To take the line from Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. Thank you so much, Michael, for coming back onto the Cardboard Herald. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know that this is just the beginning of what's bound to be some incredible other Tiny Epic games that are coming up on the horizon. Is there anything else that you wanted to plug before we sign off here?
No other plugs. Just want to say thank you to all of our tremendous supporters. I want to say thank you to you, Jack, for doing what you do as well and getting the word out to the people. And I appreciate being on your show and having a chance to kind of be a mouthpiece for Gamelyn Games and what our goals are. So just thanks for all that. And otherwise, jump on Tiny Epic Defenders. At least check it out. See what you think, because
check out those item meeples, if nothing else. I'm telling you.
If nothing else.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Michael. Hello, everyone. You thought you could get away from me without a monologue, but fortunately for me, there are outros, so I can chase you down and talk into your brain just a little bit more. Now, I wanted to thank you for putting up with some of the audio jankiness in this episode. There was some last-minute scheduling complications that required Michael to record some of his side of things outside, and I think he did admirably, but you can hear a little bit of background noise, and so, it's a thing, but he did awesome, and I think the interview went really well. I think overall, the main takeaway is how cool Tiny Epic Defenders sounds. I mean it from the bottom of my heart, from the cockles of my hearts, that is a game that I really do love, and it came to me at a very special time in my life, a very worrisome time, but also one of the happiest moments in my life, which is a story I've talked about before. But the game itself, the mechanisms, the gameplay, the arc, and especially those epic foes are something that I always love. So I really am excited by this new edition, that it's getting some love and the respect that I think the game deserves. I did want to mention a couple other things. First off, I was talking with Chris Anderson on Twitter. That's at BlueCubeBGS on Twitter, and I was asking him what was the game that he wishes got to the table, or that he thought was a particularly underrated game, and he said, I think I have to go with Flux. It gets no respect, and I wrote about it. And he put an entire article up that's in defense of Flux. And I think that it's really worth reading. You should check that out. It can be found at bluecubeboardgames.com. And once again, on Twitter, that's at bluecubebgs. And he has some really interesting stuff up on there. So, shout out to him, and definitely go check out some of his stuff. I also wanted to mention, while we're talking about board game websites, Meeple Like Us is a fantastic site about accessibility in the board game tabletop gaming hobby. It's something that I care about very deeply. Accessibility is a very important thing to my work life and my chosen career, but it's also very important to me through my own experience with families and friends of different abilities. And it's the right thing to think about, how are other people able to access and enjoy the things that I enjoy, because this is a social medium. We want people to be able to appreciate these things. And it's about respecting other people and what they have or don't have the ability to do. It's not to say that everything has to be able to be enjoyed by everyone at the same level, but I'm glad that there are people who are examining these things and doing full reviews of accessibility. So, they talk about it way more eloquently than I ever could, and they're damn entertaining at the same time. So you should check out anything by Meeple Like Us. Very cool site. One of my favorite tabletop gaming sites on the internet. Speaking of other tabletop gaming sites on the internet, I'm going to talk about mine really quick. And there's one thing that I want you to know about. From the very first episode of the Cardboard Herald, I wanted this to be something where I was as transparent as possible about my goals, about successes, about failures, challenges, all that kind of stuff. And there's something that I need from you. No, I'm not asking for money right now. That's something that I may actually go to eventually, but I want to be confident that I've built up enough of a product that I'm consistently giving you. And I think I'm doing that with the podcast and the written work. And I'm really trying to get there with the video work. And I, like anything else with the Cardboard Herald, I'm having to learn from the ground up. I knew almost nothing about audio editing when I started doing the podcast, and truly I knew virtually nothing about video editing when I started doing it. But I think that the videos that are on our YouTube channel have gotten better and better and better. I have a couple reviews and first impressions videos up there. The thing that I'm most passionate about is the cardboard cutouts episodes, which we have 2 up right now, and a 3rd is coming this weekend. And I'm going to try and have 1 new video per week, and each one, if you watch them in sequence, you're going to see that my skills are rapidly improving and hopefully are going to get somewhat decent over time. But here's my big plea. Here's the thing that I want as a takeaway, is you guys have come out and supported me in following me on Twitter. You've talked about me on Board Game Geek. You've talked about the podcast on this. You've supported the reviews that I've written. I need that kind of support now for the video work. At least go and watch the videos. And if you like them, tweet about them, share them on your Facebook, or just give me some feedback. Tell me that you liked them, or tell me what you think I could do better. And if you do that, it's going to get better, because I know this podcast has gotten a hell of a lot better since the time that I started. The written work has gotten a hell of a lot better since I got started, and I'm still finding my voice in all these things. I can't believe that I haven't been doing this a full year yet, and the remarkable difference that it has made so far. The early response to the video work has been very, very positive. The community has been very supportive. People have given me really good, actionable feedback. But you, the podcast audience, if you could help champion this and help me make it the best possible thing that we can, then I think we will have something very, very special here very soon. So let's make the Cardboard Herald YouTube channel something that's worth taking some ownership of. Speaking of which, occasionally I tweet out or put onto Facebook that I'm doing a cardboard cutouts episode and I need some photos, or I need some assistance or something in order to make the episode come to life. And I put those credits into the actual episode. If you're interested in being someone who takes photographs for us or helps out in any way, or even helps out with any other aspect of the Cardboard Herald, for all I care, if you have a voice and you don't know where to put that, I will find some way of letting you contribute to the Cardboard Herald. So you can always reach out to me, cardboardherald@gmail.com. Probably the best way is following on Twitter, reaching out to me there. I am quick to respond. And that's pretty much it. I love you. I love each and every one of you listeners. And thank you for helping me on this journey so far and helping continue as I make this move over to video work. So that's it. Thanks for listening to the Cardboard Herald. I'll talk to you next week. You guys keep on gaming.